The clock in the grand hallway of Kensington Palace struck 10 in the morning. Everything seemed normal as the palace staff went about their daily duties. The maids were polishing the silver in the dining room, while the gardeners tended to the beautiful roses outside. No one could have imagined that in just 2 hours everything would change completely. Sarah Thompson had been working as a palace secretary for 15 years. She knew the royal schedule like the back of her hand. Prince William and Princess Catherine had no public events planned for today. Their calendar was completely empty. Sarah was enjoying her quiet morning when her phone rang with an urgent tone she had never heard before. The voice on the other end belonged to the Queen's private secretary. His words were rushed and filled with excitement. Prince William and Catherine needed to make an immediate public appearance. The location was already decided and the cars were being prepared. Sarah dropped her pen in shock. She had never received such short notice for a royal visit. Within minutes, the entire palace was buzzing with activity. Staff members were running through the corridors carrying papers and making urgent phone calls. The head of security was speaking rapidly into his radio while checking his watch every few seconds. Something very important was happening, but nobody knew exactly what it was. The press office was in complete chaos. Jenny Martinez had been working there for 8 years and had never seen anything like this. Her computer screen was filled with urgent emails from news reporters asking for details about the surprise visit. The problem was that Jenny had very few details to share. All she knew was that the prince and princess would be visiting a community center in South London. The community center was called Riverside Community Center. It was located in a neighborhood where many families struggled to make ends meet. Jenny had never heard of this place before today. She wondered why the royal couple would choose to visit there without any advance planning. Usually royal visits were planned months in advance, with every detail carefully arranged. As Jenny typed the press release, her hands were shaking slightly. She wrote that Prince William and Catherine would be making a special visit to meet with local families and community members. She did not mention any specific purpose for the visit because she simply did not know. The mystery was making everyone at the palace very curious. Meanwhile, across London at the Riverside Community Center, Sarah Martinez was having the most shocking day of her life. She had been the director of the center for 12 years and had never received a call from Kensington Palace. When her phone rang that morning, she thought it was a joke at first. The voice on the other end was very polite and very serious. They wanted to know if the center could accommodate a royal visit in just 3 hours. Sarah's mind was racing as she tried to understand what was happening. The center was facing serious financial problems and might have to close soon. She had been working day and night trying to find solutions, but nothing seemed to work. Now suddenly the most famous couple in Britain wanted to visit her small community center. It felt like a dream that could not be real. The news spread quickly through the neighborhood. Mrs. Johnson, who lived next door to the center, heard about the visit from her daughter, who worked at the local shop. Within an hour, there were people gathering outside the center, hoping to catch a glimpse of the royal couple. Children were pressing their faces against the windows of nearby houses, trying to see if the black cars had arrived yet. Back at the palace, the royal couple was getting ready for their surprise visit. Catherine was choosing a simple blue dress that would not look too formal for a community setting. William was reviewing what little information they had about the center and the people they would meet. Both of them seemed more excited than nervous about this unexpected addition to their day. The mystery of why they had chosen this particular place and this particular day would soon be revealed to everyone waiting at the Riverside Community Center. The Riverside Community Center stood like a lighthouse in the middle of a struggling neighborhood. For 22 years, it had been the heart of the community where families came together during their hardest times. The building was old but filled with warmth and love from all the people who had found hope within its walls. Sarah Martinez walked through the empty hallways early that morning before the royal announcement came. She touched the colorful drawings that children had made and hung on the walls. Each picture told a story of a child who had found joy and safety at the center. But Sarah's heart was heavy because she knew these walls might soon be empty forever. The center was facing the worst crisis in its history. The government had cut their funding by 60% just 3 months ago. Local businesses that used to donate money were struggling themselves and could not help anymore. Sarah had tried everything she could think of to save the place that meant so much to so many people. Every night Sarah stayed late at her desk writing letters to officials and important people asking for help. Her computer was filled with emails to politicians who rarely answered back. She had organized bake sales and charity drives, but the money they raised was like drops of water trying to fill an ocean. The bills kept coming, and the bank account kept getting smaller. The center provided services that many families could not live without. Every day after school, more than 100 children came there for help with homework and hot meals. Many of these children had parents who worked 2 or 3 jobs just to pay rent. Without the center, these children would have nowhere safe to go after school. Mrs. Rosa Gonzalez brought her 3 children to the center every day. She worked as a cleaner at a hospital during the day and at an office building at night. The center was the only place where she knew her children would be safe and fed while she worked. When she heard about the possible closure, she cried for hours thinking about what would happen to her family. The center also ran job training programs for adults who had lost their work or wanted to learn new skills. James Patterson was 45 years old when he lost his factory job after 20 years. He came to the center feeling hopeless and angry. The staff helped him learn computer skills and writing. Now he had a new job at a small company and could support his family again. For the elderly people in the neighborhood, the center was often their only connection to other human beings. Every Tuesday and Thursday they came for tea and conversation. Many of them lived alone and had no family nearby. Mrs. Ellen Davis was 82 years old and had been coming to the center for 5 years. She said it was the only place where people remembered her name and cared about her stories. The center's kitchen served over 300 meals every week to families who could not afford enough food. Volunteers worked together to cook simple but nutritious meals. Children who were hungry at home could always find something to eat at the center. Parents who were struggling could take home extra food for their families. Sarah had calculated that closing the center would affect more than 500 people directly. But the real number was much higher because each person who used the center had family members and friends who depended on them. The center was like a stone thrown into water, creating circles that spread far beyond what anyone could see. The building itself was starting to show signs of the financial problems. The heating system was old and expensive to run. Some windows needed repair, and the roof leaked when it rained hard. Sarah spent many nights worrying about how to pay for basic maintenance, while also keeping the programs running. Despite all these problems, the staff and volunteers never gave up hope. They continued to welcome everyone with smiles and open arms. They knew that for many people, the center was not just a building, but a lifeline that kept them connected to hope and community during their darkest times. 3 months earlier, Princess Catherine had been driving through South London after visiting a children's hospital nearby. She was not in her official royal car, but in a simple black vehicle with just one security officer. Catherine often took these quiet drives to think about her work and the people she had met during her royal duties. As her car stopped at a red traffic light, Catherine noticed something unusual. Behind a modest brick building, she could see children playing in a small courtyard. Their laughter filled the air, and they seemed so happy despite the simple playground equipment. Catherine had always been drawn to places where children gathered, and she asked her driver to pull over so she could take a closer look. The building had a small sign that read Riverside Community Center. Catherine could see through the windows that inside was bustling with activity. Elderly people were sitting around tables talking and sharing tea. Adults were gathered in another room that looked like a classroom. The whole place seemed alive with purpose and community spirit. Catherine made a decision that would change everything. She told her security officer that she wanted to go inside and meet the people who ran this special place. He was worried about her safety and the lack of advanced planning, but Catherine was determined. She had learned to trust her instincts about places and people that felt important. Sarah Martinez was shocked when a well-dressed woman walked into her office that afternoon. At first, she did not recognize Catherine because she was wearing simple clothes and no jewelry. Catherine introduced herself quietly and asked if she could learn more about the center's work. Sarah was so surprised she could barely speak. Catherine spent 2 hours at the center that first day. She sat with children doing their homework and listened to their dreams about the future. She talked with elderly visitors who shared stories about their families and their lives in the neighborhood. She met parents who worked multiple jobs but still found time to volunteer at the center because it meant so much to their families. What touched Catherine most deeply was seeing how everyone at the center cared for each other like a real family. When one child was sad about problems at home, the others gathered around to comfort him. When Mrs. Davis mentioned that she had no one to celebrate her birthday with, the staff organized a surprise party for her the next week. Catherine began coming to the center regularly, but always in secret. She would arrive in ordinary clothes with minimal security and spend hours talking with people and helping wherever she could. Sometimes she brought homemade sandwiches for the lunch program. Other times she simply sat and listened to people who needed someone to hear their stories. The staff at the center were sworn to secrecy about Catherine's visits. They understood that she wanted to help without the pressure and attention that came with her royal status. Catherine was not there as the Princess of Wales, but simply as a person who cared about the community and wanted to make a difference. During her visits, Catherine learned about each family's struggles and dreams. She met Maria Santos, whose husband had been injured at work and could no longer support their family. She talked with a teenage boy named David who was struggling in school but had found confidence through the center's tutoring program. She listened to a war veteran named Michael who said the center was the only place where he felt understood and accepted. Catherine also learned about the center's financial problems from Sarah Martinez. She saw how hard Sarah worked to keep the programs running despite having very little money. Catherine watched Sarah stay late every night writing grant applications and organizing fundraising events that brought in small amounts of money compared to what was really needed. As weeks turned into months, Catherine realized that the Riverside Community Center represented everything she believed about helping people and building stronger communities. She knew that losing this place would be devastating for hundreds of families who depended on it for support, hope, and connection. Prince William began to notice changes in his wife over the past few months. Catherine would come home from her secret visits to the Riverside Community Center with stories that made her eyes light up with joy or fill with tears of concern. She talked about the children who were learning to read better and the adults who had found new jobs through the center's programs. Catherine would often sit quietly at dinner thinking about something that seemed very important to her. William knew his wife well enough to understand that she was carrying the weight of other people's problems in her heart. When she finally told him about her regular visits to the community center, William was not surprised, but he was deeply moved by her dedication. William listened carefully as Catherine described each person she had met at the center. She told him about Mrs. Gonzalez, who worked 2 jobs to support her 3 children, and how much the after-school program meant to her family. She shared stories about elderly people who found friendship and purpose at the center after feeling lonely and forgotten by the world. What worried William most was seeing how emotionally invested Catherine had become in the center's survival. She would check her phone constantly, hoping for good news about funding applications that Sarah Martinez had submitted. When rejection letters arrived, Catherine felt each disappointment as if it were happening to her own family. One evening, Catherine came home particularly upset after learning that the center might have to close within 2 months if they could not find a major donor. She had spent hours with Sarah trying to think of new solutions, but nothing seemed realistic given the amount of money they needed. Catherine felt helpless knowing that all the families who depended on the center would soon have nowhere to turn. William made a decision that night that would change everything for the Riverside Community Center. He told Catherine that they needed to do more than just visit and offer emotional support. They had the power and resources to actually save the center, and they should use that power to help the community that had touched Catherine's heart so deeply. Together, William and Catherine began developing a plan that went far beyond a typical royal visit. They would make a public appearance at the center to bring media attention to its important work. But more importantly, they would announce a substantial financial commitment that would ensure the center's survival for many years to come. William worked with palace financial advisors and legal experts to establish a special fund that would provide ongoing support for the center. The fund would be large enough to cover operating costs and allow the center to expand its programs to help even more families. William insisted that the donation should be significant enough to make a real difference, not just a symbolic gesture. Catherine worked closely with Sarah Martinez to identify the center's most urgent needs and plan how the funding could be used most effectively. They discussed expanding the job training programs and adding new services for families facing homelessness. Catherine also wanted to create a scholarship program to help young people from the center attend college or trade schools. The couple decided to keep their plan completely secret until the day of the announcement. They wanted the surprise to have maximum impact and inspire other wealthy donors to support similar community centers across the country. William believed that their public support would encourage businesses and individuals to look for ways to help their own local communities. Planning the visit required careful coordination with palace staff and security teams. The couple wanted the event to feel personal and genuine rather than formal and distant. They asked for minimal security presence so they could interact freely with the families at the center. Catherine insisted that the children should be able to approach them naturally without barriers or restrictions. William also contacted media relations specialists to ensure that coverage of the visit would focus on the center's important work rather than just the royal appearance. He wanted news stories to include information about how people could support similar community programs and what difference these centers made in people's lives. As the day of the visit approached, both William and Catherine felt excited and nervous about revealing their connection to the center. They knew that going public would mean they could no longer make quiet private visits, but they also understood that their announcement could transform the center's future and possibly inspire broader changes in how communities support their most vulnerable members. The crowd outside the Riverside Community Center had been growing all morning after news of the royal visit spread through the neighborhood. People stood on their doorsteps and leaned out of windows hoping to catch a glimpse of Prince William and Princess Catherine. Children pressed their faces against shop windows while their parents held phones ready to capture the historic moment. Mrs. Johnson had lived on the same street for 40 years and had never seen so much excitement in her neighborhood. She brought a folding chair from her house and set it up on the sidewalk, determined not to miss the arrival of the most famous couple in Britain. Her granddaughter Emma had taken the day off work to join her grandmother for this once-in-a-lifetime event. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 black cars turned onto the street leading to the community center. The crowd grew quiet with anticipation as the vehicles approached slowly and smoothly. Police officers had cleared a path, but the atmosphere felt more like a celebration than a formal security operation. The middle car stopped directly in front of the community center's main entrance. A security officer stepped out first and scanned the crowd with professional eyes, but his expression was relaxed and friendly. The crowd held its breath as the car door opened, and Prince William emerged into the bright afternoon sunlight. William stood tall and confident, wearing a navy blue suit that looked both formal and approachable. He smiled genuinely at the people gathered around him and raised his hand in a friendly wave that made several children giggle with excitement. His presence immediately transformed the ordinary street into a place where something extraordinary was about to happen. Princess Catherine stepped out of the car next, and the crowd's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. She wore a simple but elegant blue dress that somehow managed to look both royal and perfectly suited for a community gathering. Her hair moved gently in the breeze, and her smile was warm and authentic as her eyes swept across the assembled faces. What struck everyone watching was how comfortable and natural both William and Catherine appeared in this modest neighborhood setting. They did not seem like distant royal figures making an obligatory appearance, but rather like people who genuinely wanted to be there and connect with the community. The couple began moving through the crowd, stopping to shake hands and exchange words with people who had waited hours to see them. William knelt down to speak with a young boy who had been too shy to approach, while Catherine listened intently to an elderly woman who began sharing her story about how the community center had helped her family. There was something different about this royal visit that even the most experienced royal watchers in the crowd could sense. William and Catherine moved with a familiarity that suggested they were not strangers to this place or these people. They seemed to know exactly where they were going and genuinely excited to be there. Catherine stopped to speak with Maria Santos, who was standing with her 3 children near the center's entrance. Maria was surprised when Catherine remembered her name and asked about her husband's recovery from his work injury. The children stared in amazement as the princess knelt down to their eye level and asked about their school and their favorite activities at the center. William spent several minutes talking with David, the teenage boy who had struggled in school but found confidence through the center's tutoring program. David could not believe that Prince William remembered details about his progress and his dreams of becoming an engineer. The conversation felt natural and encouraging rather than formal or rushed. The royal protection officers maintained a respectful distance, understanding that this moment required a more personal touch than usual. They had been briefed that this visit was particularly important to the royal couple and that the usual protocols should be relaxed to allow for genuine interactions. As William and Catherine made their way toward the community center's front door, the crowd could sense that something significant was about to happen inside. The anticipation was electric, and everyone watching felt privileged to witness what clearly was not just another stop on the royal schedule, but something much more meaningful and personal. The couple paused at the entrance and turned back to wave at the crowd one more time. Their expressions showed excitement mixed with emotion, as if they were about to share something very close to their hearts with people they had come to care about deeply. The moment Prince William and Princess Catherine stepped through the front door of the Riverside Community Center, the atmosphere inside became electric with surprise and joy. The main hall was filled with people who had gathered hoping to meet the royal couple, but many of them gasped in recognition when they saw Catherine's familiar face. Mrs. Ellen Davis was sitting in her usual chair near the window when Catherine walked in. The 82-year-old woman's eyes filled with tears as she realized that the kind lady who had been visiting the center for months and bringing her homemade cookies was actually the Princess of Wales. Mrs. Davis had shared so many stories with Catherine about her late husband and her loneliness, never knowing she was talking to royalty. Sarah Martinez stood at the front of the room, struggling to contain her emotions as she prepared to welcome William and Catherine officially for the first time. For months she had kept Catherine's visits secret, knowing how important it was for the princess to connect with the community without the pressure of media attention. Now she could finally acknowledge publicly the support Catherine had already been providing. Catherine moved through the room greeting people she had come to know as friends over the past few months. She hugged Mrs. Gonzalez and asked about her night shift job and how the children were doing in school. She remembered that little Sophia had been learning to read and wanted to know about her progress with the new books they had been practicing together. The children, who had been doing homework with Catherine during her secret visits, could hardly believe what was happening. Tommy Williams was 7 years old and had always called her Miss Kate, not knowing her real identity. He ran up to her with a drawing he had made showing a princess helping children with their reading, and Catherine realized he had somehow understood who she was even when she tried to keep it secret. William was amazed as he watched his wife interact with people who clearly knew her well and cared about her deeply. He could see the genuine affection in their faces and understood why Catherine had become so emotionally invested in this community. These were not strangers meeting royalty for the first time, but friends welcoming someone who had already proven her commitment to their well-being. In the children's area, colorful artwork covered the walls and small tables were arranged for homework and activities. William knelt down to look at projects the children had been working on and was impressed by their creativity and enthusiasm. A group of kids surrounded him, eager to show off their reading skills and tell him about their favorite books and games. Catherine led William to the Job Training Center, where adults were learning computer skills and preparing for new careers. James Patterson was there working on his resume and could not believe that Princess Catherine remembered his story about losing his factory job and his journey to learn new skills. He proudly showed William the certificate he had earned and talked about his new position at a local company. The couple spent time in the kitchen where volunteers prepared meals for families who needed extra food support. William helped serve lunch alongside regular volunteers, while Catherine sat with families eating together and talking about their daily lives. The atmosphere was warm and welcoming, with none of the formality that usually surrounded royal appearances. In the senior center area, elderly community members were gathered around tables playing cards and sharing stories. William listened intently as veterans shared their military experiences and talked about how the community center had helped them connect with other people who understood their challenges. Catherine sat with women who had become like grandmothers to the neighborhood children. Throughout their time inside the center, William could see why this place had captured Catherine's heart so completely. It was not just a building with programs, but a real community where people of all ages supported each other through difficult times and celebrated together during happy moments. Sarah Martinez watched with growing emotion as the royal couple moved naturally through the center, interacting with everyone as if they had been part of this community family for years. She knew that something important was about to happen, but she had no idea how dramatically this day would change the future of everyone gathered in that room. The energy in the center continued to build as more people realized that this was not just a formal visit, but something much more personal and meaningful that would be remembered by everyone present for the rest of their lives. After spending nearly an hour moving through the different areas of the community center, Princess Catherine asked Sarah Martinez if she could address everyone gathered in the main hall. Her voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable emotion in her tone that made everyone stop what they were doing and listen carefully. Catherine stood at the front of the room, with Prince William beside her as family, staff members, and volunteers gathered around. The children sat cross-legged on the floor, while adults found chairs or stood along the walls. The room became completely silent as everyone sensed that something very important was about to be shared. Catherine began by telling everyone how she had first discovered the Riverside Community Center 3 months earlier during a drive through their neighborhood. She described seeing the children playing in the courtyard and feeling drawn to learn more about the place that seemed so full of life and purpose. Her words were simple and heartfelt as she explained how that first visit had changed her understanding of what real community support looked like. She talked about Mrs. Ellen Davis and how their conversations over tea had taught her about the importance of human connection, especially for people who might otherwise feel forgotten or alone. Catherine's voice became softer as she described watching Mrs. Davis light up when other community members remembered her stories and celebrated her birthday with a surprise party. Catherine shared the story of James Patterson and how witnessing his journey from unemployment to finding new purpose had shown her the power of giving people opportunities rather than just charity. She explained how watching James regain his confidence through the job training program had taught her that everyone deserves a chance to rebuild their lives when circumstances beyond their control create hardship. The children in the room listened with wide eyes as Catherine talked about their homework sessions together and how much she had learned from their dreams and their resilience. She mentioned Tommy Williams by name and how his drawings had shown her that children understand kindness and caring even when they do not know someone's title or status in the world. Catherine's voice began to break slightly with emotion as she described watching families support each other through the center's programs. She talked about parents working multiple jobs but still finding time to volunteer because they wanted to give back to the community that had helped them. She spoke about teenagers helping younger children with homework and elderly people sharing their wisdom with families facing difficult decisions. Prince William listened intently as his wife shared experiences that had clearly touched her heart deeply. He could see the faces in the room reflecting the same emotions Catherine was expressing, and he understood why this community had become so important to her personal mission as a member of the royal family. Catherine explained that over the months of visiting the center, she had come to understand that this was not just a building with helpful programs, but a living example of how communities could support their most vulnerable members with dignity and respect. She described seeing people find hope during their darkest moments and watching children develop confidence that would serve them throughout their lives. The room remained absolutely silent as Catherine talked about learning from Sarah Martinez about the center's financial struggles and the possibility that this vital community resource might have to close. She admitted that the thought of families losing this support system had kept her awake at night and made her realize that sometimes caring about something means taking action, even when it requires making personal sacrifices. Catherine paused and took a deep breath, looking around the room at faces that had become familiar and important to her over the past 3 months. She could see Mrs. Gonzalez holding her youngest child and Mrs. Davis wiping tears from her eyes. The teenagers from the tutoring program were standing together near the back of the room, and the elderly volunteers were nodding with understanding and appreciation. Prince William stepped slightly forward, sensing that his wife was preparing to share something that would change everything for everyone in that room. The anticipation was almost overwhelming as Catherine prepared to reveal the real reason they had decided to make this visit public and what it would mean for the future of the Riverside Community Center and all the families who depended on it. Princess Catherine took another deep breath and looked directly at Sarah Martinez before speaking the words that would change everything for the Riverside Community Center. Her voice was clear and strong despite the emotion she was feeling as she announced that she and Prince William were establishing a permanent fund to ensure the center would never face closure due to financial difficulties again. The silence in the room was complete and profound as people tried to process what they had just heard. Catherine continued explaining that the fund would be substantial enough not only to save the center from its current crisis, but to expand its programs and serve even more families in the neighborhood who needed support. Sarah Martinez felt her knees go weak as the reality of the announcement began to sink in. For months she had worked desperately trying to find solutions to keep the center open, writing grant applications and organizing fundraising events that brought in small amounts compared to what was needed. Now suddenly the financial pressure that had been crushing her was lifted completely. Mrs. Ellen Davis was the first person to react visibly as tears began streaming down her face. She had been coming to the center for 5 years, and it had become her second home, where she found friendship and purpose after feeling isolated and forgotten. The thought of losing this place had terrified her, but now she knew she would be able to continue her weekly visits and her friendships for years to come. Prince William stepped forward to explain that their decision was not charity, but an investment in the kind of community building that strengthens society as a whole. He talked about witnessing the incredible work being done at the center and understanding how it served as a model for what communities could accomplish when they supported their most vulnerable members with dignity and respect. The couple explained that the fund would allow the center to expand its after-school programs to serve more children whose parents worked multiple jobs. It would enable the job training programs to offer more specialized skills and help more adults find stable employment. The senior services could be enhanced to provide even better support for elderly community members who depended on the center for social connection. Catherine shared their vision for creating a scholarship program that would help young people from the center attend college or trade schools. She talked about wanting to establish partnerships with local businesses to create more job opportunities for program graduates. The fund would also ensure that the building itself could be properly maintained and updated to serve the community for generations to come. As the full scope of what this meant began to dawn on everyone in the room, the silence was broken by the sound of Maria Gonzalez beginning to cry. She thought about her 3 children who came to the center every day after school for help with homework and hot meals. She had been terrified about what would happen to them if the center closed while she worked her 2 jobs to support the family. James Patterson could hardly believe what he was hearing. The center's job training program had completely changed his life after he lost his factory position. He had gained new skills and confidence that led to stable employment and the ability to support his family again. Now other people facing similar challenges would have the same opportunities that had transformed his life. The children in the room began to understand that their safe place for homework help and friendship would not disappear. Tommy Williams looked up at Catherine with huge eyes, realizing that Miss Kate, who had been helping him learn to read, was actually a princess who was saving his favorite place in the whole world. Prince William announced that they also plan to use their public platform to highlight similar community centers across the country, hoping to inspire broader support for local initiatives that made real differences in people's lives. He explained that the Riverside Community Center would serve as an example of what was possible when communities came together to support each other. Catherine added that while their financial contribution would ensure the center's survival, the real strength of the place came from the people in that room who cared for each other like family. She said that the money was just a tool to help them continue the amazing work they were already doing to build a stronger and more caring community. The room remained silent for several more seconds as the magnitude of what had just happened settled over everyone present. Then slowly the silence began to transform into something else as people realized that their worst fears had just been replaced with the most incredible hope they could have imagined. The silence that had filled the room after Catherine's announcement suddenly exploded into a mixture of cheers, applause, and tears as the full impact of what had just happened began to settle in everyone's hearts. The sound was overwhelming and beautiful as months of fear and worry transformed instantly into pure joy and overwhelming gratitude. Sarah Martinez was crying so hard she could barely stand as she tried to find words to thank Prince William and Princess Catherine. For months she had carried the weight of knowing that hundreds of families would lose their support system if she could not find a solution to the center's financial crisis. Now that crushing burden was lifted and replaced with the most incredible relief and happiness she had ever experienced. Mrs. Ellen Davis was sobbing with joy as she realized that her weekly visits to the center would continue for as long as she wanted them. At 82 years old, she had feared spending her remaining years alone and isolated, but now she knew she would always have her community family to share stories and celebrations with. Her tears were for the loneliness that would never return. The children in the room reacted with pure excitement as they understood that their safe place would never disappear. Tommy Williams ran straight to Catherine and hugged her legs tightly, while other children gathered around both William and Catherine, chattering excitedly about all the things they would continue to do at the center. Maria Gonzalez held her 3 children close as tears of relief streamed down her face. She had been working 2 jobs and worrying constantly about what would happen to her family if the center closed. Now she knew her children would always have a safe place to go after school, and she could continue working to support them without fear. James Patterson stood with the other adults from the job training program, amazed that the place that had given him a second chance at life would now be able to help many more people facing similar challenges. He thought about all the families who would find hope and opportunity through programs that almost disappeared forever. Prince William and Catherine spent the next hour personally thanking every person present and listening to more stories about how the center had changed lives. They took photos with families and promised to return for visits to see how the expanded programs would help even more people in the community. Catherine knelt down with the children as they showed her more of their artwork and told her about their dreams for the future. William talked with the adults about their ideas for new programs and services that could be added now that funding was secure. Everyone felt free to share their biggest hopes, knowing that resources would no longer be a barrier. Outside the center, news of the announcement had spread rapidly through the neighborhood, and crowds of people were gathering hoping to be part of this historic day. Local news reporters had arrived and were interviewing community members about what the center meant to them and how the royal announcement would change their lives. When William and Catherine finally emerged from the center to address the larger crowd that had assembled, the cheers were deafening. Catherine spoke briefly about their commitment to supporting grassroots community work across the country, while William emphasized that the Riverside Community Center represented the best of what communities could accomplish when they supported each other. As their cars prepared to leave, the royal couple stood waving to the crowd that had grown to several hundred people from the neighborhood and beyond. Children were holding handmade signs thanking them, while adults wiped tears from their eyes and applauded the decision that had saved their community lifeline. Back inside the center, the celebration continued as families began planning for a future they had feared might not exist. Sarah Martinez was already thinking about which programs to expand first and how to serve even more families who needed support. The staff and volunteers were hugging each other and laughing through their tears of joy. Mrs. Davis sat in her favorite chair by the window watching all the excitement around her and feeling more grateful than she had ever felt in her 82 years. The center had given her friendship and purpose when she thought her life no longer mattered to anyone, and now it would continue to be her home away from home for years to come. The day that had started with an unexpected announcement had ended with tears of joy and the promise of new beginnings for everyone whose lives had been touched by the Riverside Community Center. The royal visit had brought much more than media attention and funding. It had brought hope and proof that caring individuals really could change entire communities for the better.